Red Purple Law versus Enel. This is actually the final gameplay video I'm going to drop of Red Purple Law, as it's officially getting banned starting tomorrow here in the West region. Rest in peace, or good riddance, as some people would say, as this deck was a bit of a menace, and it's going to be even more of a menace in the next format if it was allowed to stay around. Thank goodness Bandai is smart and decided to give us in the West a brand new, quote-unquote brand new 08, where we're not going to have Red Purple Law stomping all over all decks, so we're going to get a little bit more maybe of a diverse meta here. But we're going into Enel. We're going fast here, as fast as I can go. We're going to send 5k and then a 6k. We ended up taking second here, as Red Purple Law typically likes to play on the even curve here, so this does work out, though this does give it kind of messes up the rotation a little bit, but Enel doesn't swing at me, so it doesn't really matter if I go first or second, right? If I get the first swing or not, because Enel's not typically going to swing at me. Enel's going to go ahead and send 5k. I'm going to go ahead and try to like assume he doesn't have a Gadatsu in hand, but he Gadatsu's me right into a glare. That is a Gadatsu. That Gadatsu does eat my Zoro here, so I ended up eating a card out of hand, and also unfortunately losing my body. But that bait there was to try to see, like, maybe he didn't have a Gadatsu potentially, right? If he didn't swing at it, but potentially he would have swung more. I don't know, in hindsight maybe I should have played it a little differently, but this is a guy that I play against a lot. He's like our pretty traditional Enel player. He plays Enel all the time, so he's very well versed in this matchup, because I've played against him several times off camera. So I'm already like feeling a little less confident going into this, especially since he's already being pretty aggressive, countering out of a lot of things here, staying at a pretty high life total. I'm going to go ahead and I decided to play out a Sachi Penguin, do nothing with it, bottom deck it, then play out the second Sachi and Penguin. So it was we tricked him with the first one, but then the second one came out and gave me some Dawn back. Bottom decking that Gadatsu, taking my opponent over to the 7 Dawn turn. This is the turn that could potentially play out a 7 cost Enel to swing to potentially handle their board. Instead, they're going to go ahead and send 7. They're actually sending 7 here at lead. This Enel player knows exactly what they need to do here to potentially stop me from doing shenanigans, and that's eventually accepting that you can't feed Law. You have to start feeding Law, so that way you can end the game. So basically, tells me he doesn't have any more Gadatsus in hand, or those Gadatsus are permanent 1Ks at this point. With the Rocket Luffy played out, I am kind of incentivized to bottom deck it here. I do have the nice little Gordon in hand already. Gordon could bottom deck that. I could play out some other things from hand. I have 7 Dawn here. We could play out a Bon Clay, and then bottom deck it and play out a Reiju to draw some cards up. We'll see here as we go. We're gonna go and send 5k at lead here. The opponent's gonna go ahead and take it. We're gonna potentially send another 5k at lead before we decide to start pulling the trigger on killing things. We're gonna go ahead and tap 4 first here, and we're gonna play out the Reiju here. Opponent was also pretty good at not countering out of things when he needed to, and not just building up a large hand, because again, I have the blocker Law, which could rip cards out of hand, and I've definitely won some games against this specific player by playing blocker Law, which has been pretty gross. So we've got 2 Dawn to play with. We don't really know what we're gonna do with it. We're gonna just send 7 at lead here. Just trying to force either some cards out of hand, or potentially set him a little scared, and he ends up showing me 2 cards out of hand here, trying to stay at 2 life. And then now I could play out the Gordon. Gordon's gonna bottom deck the Luffy, basically letting him not get any value, because that Luffy could potentially swing into one and then KO the other, right? So that's a little scary. And then I think we're here just gonna play out the Bon Clay. Bon Clay is a pretty solid play into Enel, right? Enel likes to play a lot of big threats, and we're getting to that turn where he starts to play big threats. I'm basically checking to see if he has a Yamato, right? If Yamato's going to come in, Yamato's not going to heal them because they're at 2 life, but Yamato will, still handle it. He does not show me the Yamato by attaching 1, but he does show me the Katakuri. Katakuri is going to put the good old Mr. Bon Clay back on the bottom of my life there, getting rid of that threat. Again, Bon Clay is a must get rid of, especially from Enel's perspective. So I was fine with that interchange, right? He had to get rid of it, or I was going to start using it. But this early in the game, right, it's not nearly as scary as it is once he already has threats on board, right? But it's still pretty darn decent. All right, here we've got, don't have enough to bottom deck anything. It is kind of hard to climb the mountain of bottom decking some of Enel's higher cost characters, But we're just going to kind of ignore that right now. We're just going to send a 5k. 5k pulls out a Shirahoshi. That Shirahoshi was probably exactly what he needed, because I think he does manage to pitch some very clunky cards. That's a Kingdom Come and another Katakuri. 2 bricks out of hand here. And then now thinking what else I want to do. Opponent's still going to try to stay under 7 cards as much as possible here to try to avoid me blocker lawing him. That blocker law is probably likely going to come out of hand at some point. Here just kind of thinking, do I want to try to attack him down to 0? We're going to send 5. I'm likely just going to get a counter out of hand. That's a 1k Rocket Luffy. We've got the Ein that we're thumbing at the top, as also have a Reiju that we could play out here. To potentially, we could potentially play 3 things out here. We're going to go ahead and think, do I want to just swing? Typically, when you swing an Enel at this point, they're likely to just take it, because they're likely to just take it, but I do have 7 Dawn up, and so my opponent could be a little worried of a Kid Killer, right, for 10k. But honestly, I should just be kind of aggressive. I should probably just swing 6k or 7k. I could have swung 7k and then swung 8k or something to try to knock that last life off, but likely we've got a big threat coming down next turn. But I think in turn maybe I should have been a little more aggressive here. Instead I just try to go for the value play. We ended up finding 2. We found a Raise Max and we found a Gordon, so that leads me a little bit into the valley of bottom decking the Katakuri here. I could bottom deck the Shirahoshi for free, which would dissuade my opponent from playing Katakuris in the future. If they're, they'd have one less good target, right? If they put a Shirahoshi back on the top of their life, I'm a little sad. But if they don't do that, it kind of limits them a little bit. They're just going to put stuff into my life, which is a little annoying, but it does prolong the game a little bit. So 3 Dawn up. Could potentially just go 8 lead. I think we're just going to go ahead and -3. We're going to just elect to bottom deck the Shirahoshi here. We're going to play at the Ein. Ein is going to ramp a Dawn. I still have Dawn left up here, but there's no reason for me to attach that Dawn and swing, right? If anything, my opponent's just gonna, it's basically cycling a card, right? So they take a life, they discard a card from hand, and then get a life, right? So it really is just cycling a card. Opponent's gonna go ahead and send 5k into something. We're just gonna let it go. In hindsight, I was relying a little bit too much on maybe that 1k counter there, because maybe I'd have one more threat on the board, as there is an ace coming out. That ace could attack if it wanted to, right? Ultimately, you do have to end the game. But we'll see here if ace decides, no, ace is going to play passive here. So ultimately, if I had 1k'd out of that, ace would have just killed it anyways. So maybe it honestly just didn't matter at that point. All right, the hand is looking a little clunky. We do have some ways to deal with some of the board here. We could go ahead and send a 5 at lead just to get a card out of hand. Enel's at 3 cards right now. We do have 2 Kitten Killers, but I'm trying to find the right window to send them off at this point, right? Because if I just turn everything sideways, likely they're just going to try to clean up my board on the crackback. But I could also just try to bottom deck the Katakuri here. I don't have a lot of ways to recur Dawn at this point, other than that that Ein in hand. But so I'm trying to minimize the amount of times I -3, because I just want all the Dawn I can have possible. We're just going to go ahead and send a 6k at life. Going to go ahead and get a cycle, because opponent's feeling relatively safe that, I'm not going to have anything to play. It looks like it's a trigger. It's an Onami to KO my Reiju. That is pretty unfortunate here. And then thinking I have 6 Dawn open, we could bottom deck the Katakuri. We could also just play out a Kitten Killer. And I think one of the big mistakes I made of this game was holding onto my Kitten Killers for way too long. If I had potentially played out my Kitten Killer here and attached 2 and swung 9k at lead with 3 cards in hand, I would either eat up my opponent's hand or set them to 0, which likely could have happened here. We're going to go ahead and just play out both of those. We're going to -3000 on Katakuri. We're going to -3000 again on Katakuri, making Katakuri bottom deckable. We're going to go ahead and bottom deck Katakuri. That Gordon and Raise Max wasn't going to be any better. We're going to just play out the blocker here. In hindsight, maybe I should have played out the Kitten Killer. I've got 2, basically my hand now is just 2 Kitten Killers, right? Which is a little scary. Gonna go ahead and attack into Ein. Now I think with a second ace on board, my opponent might just start pressuring my life here. And I think, I'm fine with just taking it. So if I had decided to set him to 0, he would have been at 1 here with only 3 cards in hand, instead of being at 2, which is a little scarier here. I think typically, I like to hold some of my rush threats for an in-turn game. But in this specific situation, I think it would have just been more warranted to try to set him to 0. Because now I'm at 6 Dawn, not a lot of Dawn to work with. I do find a Sachi Penguin, which is a way for me to like build a board and still like get Dawn back. But like now that he started to turn his crosshair on me, I'm feeling a little bit of scared here. As I don't have, and then another Shirahoshi off the top. I think talking to him after this game, this second Shirahoshi definitely like cleaned up his hand even better. He goes in and discards a Parasparrow and then a 0 cost event. So it makes me wonder what's in his hand. He probably has some boss monsters because ultimately Enel just wants to chain over and over again. So you have to like catch Enel in this weird spot in between like chaining, right? To where you try to finish a game where they still like have like at least 2 boss monsters in hand and also have some counter, right? It's where their whole hand isn't counter. But I know this specific Enel player plays in a way that definitely, you know, maybe is a little trickier, right? Just because he kind of knows this matchup in and out. I know this matchup to a degree, but though I'm a little flustered at this point because this matchup is getting pretty difficult at this point. Sitting at 7k, we're gonna go play out a kid. I could go ahead and -3 just bottom, just keep the Shirahoshis off the board at all times, and then play out Sachi and Penguin. Sachi Penguin's gonna take me back up, but I still got the 2 Kitten Killers in hand, so I'm still just like in the same situation I was last turn. Now I have 2 blockers. I've got 2 Kitten Killers in my hand, and my opponent's hand is starting to grow a little bit, right? And that's where things start to get a little scary. We see a Yamato come down. Yamato's going to pop my blocker that I didn't attack with. Enel's going to swing into my other thing, basically showing that I don't have any counter in hand because I just let it go immediately instead of trying to block. But again, I want to kind of try to keep my things up. I don't want to block with a kid because I know the kid's just going to die to an ace. So now I'm like in this weird situation where he decides to just go fully out here, and like now I'm in this like specific situation, triggering out an All Sunday. All Sunday's gonna ramp me up, but I do not have 6 Dawn, so I don't get to draw a card here. So I did just find another body off of that, but I'm like in this weird situation where I don't have enough to go potentially enough to go for lethal with, unless like his hand is just the absolute brick, like just brick so hard, because I just don't have enough Dawn to play Kitten Killers out. If I had already played out a Kitten Killer and set him to 0, he would have been potentially at 1 life here, and maybe more cards out of hand. I'm going to go ahead and just start with a 5k. I definitely should have played the Kitten Killer earlier, for sure. I should have used it to set him down to 0 on an earlier turn, and then like use that blocker law for another situation. We're just going to send 7 at lead. Opponent's going to take it. We're just probably going to send another like 6. We could probably just go 6. Got another 2k in hand, 6, and then he's got that's all counter, right? So he ended up keeping a hand like with a boss monster in it and a bunch of counter, which basically allowed for me to like no longer go for lethal, right? So I can go 7k here, 7k at lead. He's gonna take it. He's just gonna trash it. It's gonna just be another life, and then I can just law effect and then play out another Kitten Killer. But again, I needed to get a little closer, but my opponent played that really well. I definitely waited a little too long for one of the Kitten Killers, so by the time the second Kitten Killer comes out, it's already game, right? It's game for my opponent. He's got it. He just triggers an Onami anyways, just a little bit of salt in the wound. But unfortunately, that was really well played by my opponent, and that was a little mistake I made. Unfortunately, that potentially would have set this game up slightly different, but my opponent also just like had a lot of answers to everything I needed. So other than that, that's it. Say sayonara to LOL. If you enjoy this type of content, feel free to subscribe. We'll see you in the next video.